Imagine a country that was once one of the wealthiest in the world, but today faces one of the worst economic crises in its history. A place where inflation seems limitless, where wages vanish overnight, and where the population struggles to survive amid an instability that never ends. This is Argentina, a country of extremes, incredible natural wealth, and a vibrant culture, but also one plagued by governments that, over the decades, have plunged the nation into a vicious cycle of crisis and corruption. How did a country that was once one of the most prosperous in Latin America fall to this point? Today, we'll dive into the history of this fascinating and chaotic country, exploring its riches, its problems, and its biggest scandals. With 2.78 million square kilometers, Argentina is the 8th largest country in the world and the 2nd largest in South America, trailing only Brazil. Located at the southern tip of the continent, Argentina borders Chile, Bolivia, Paraguay, Brazil, and Uruguay, and is washed by the Atlantic Ocean. Its geography is so diverse that the country features nearly every type of climate, from subtropical in the north to polar in Tierra del Fuego, the southernmost region of the world before Antarctica. The Andes mountain range dominates the western part of the country, forming a natural barrier with Chile and home to Aconcagua, the highest mountain in the Americas, standing at 6,961 meters. In addition to its stunning geography, Argentina also plays a strategic global role. Its vast natural resources include oil, natural gas, and one of the largest lithium reserves in the world, an essential element for smartphone batteries and electric cars. This has led powers like China and the United States to vie for influence in the country, seeking access to these valuable resources. Argentina's history is a true roller coaster. The country was once one of the richest nations in the world, but it has also faced coups, dictatorships, economic collapses, and crises that seem to repeat in an endless cycle. To understand how Argentina arrived at its current state, we need to go back to the beginning. Before the arrival of Europeans, Argentina's territory was inhabited by various indigenous tribes, including the Mapuches, Querandis, and Guaranis. But everything changed in the 16th century when the Spanish landed and transformed the region into part of their vast empire. Buenos Aires was founded in 1536, abandoned for a while, and later rebuilt in 1580, becoming an important commercial port. For centuries, Spain tightly controlled the colony's economy, preventing Buenos Aires from prospering as it should have. But in the early 19th century, all of Latin America began to fight for independence, and Argentina was no exception. In 1816, the country finally broke free from Spain, becoming a sovereign nation. The problem? Independence came with a series of internal conflicts between groups with completely opposite visions for the country's future. On one side, the Federalists, who wanted autonomy for each province. On the other, the Unitarians, who advocated for a strong central government. This conflict marked Argentine politics for decades. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, Argentina experienced its golden age. The country became one of the richest in the world, thanks to the export of beef, wheat, and wool to Europe. Buenos Aires grew rapidly, modernized, and was even called the Paris of South America. The Argentine elite lived like Europeans, while immigrants from Italy, Spain, and Germany arrived in droves, bringing culture, work, and new ideas. In the 1920s, Argentina was one of the top 10 largest economies in the world, surpassing countries like Canada and Australia. But this prosperity wouldn't last forever. The 1929 crisis shook exports, and the country entered a period of political instability. It was in this context that one of the most significant leaders in Argentine history emerged, Juan Domingo Perón. With a nationalist and populist speech, he took power in the 1940s and implemented policies of industrialization and workers' rights. Alongside his wife, Evita Perón, he won the support of the masses, especially the workers. But his government was also marked by authoritarianism and increased public spending, which would later become a chronic problem in Argentina. After Perón, the country went through a succession of political crises, military coups, and unstable governments. The worst phase came between 1976 and 1983, when a brutal military dictatorship took power. During this period, thousands of people were persecuted, imprisoned, tortured, and killed. Many simply disappeared in one of the darkest chapters of Argentina's history. In 1983, democracy returned, but economic problems persisted. The country faced hyperinflation, price freezes, currency devaluation, and recurring crises. The most devastating came in 2001 when Argentina went bankrupt, plunging thousands of people into poverty overnight. Banks closed, the government seized people's deposits, and Argentines took to the streets in massive protests, leading to the resignation of President Fernando de la Rúa. Since then, Argentina has lived through an eternal economic roller coaster. The country remains a giant with enormous potential, but it seems trapped in a cycle of political and financial mistakes that hinder its progress. But not everything is a crisis. Despite the challenges, Argentina is one of the most impressive tourist destinations in the world. Now, let's take a step away from the political and economic chaos and explore the natural and cultural wonders that make this country a unique place. The capital, Buenos Aires, is the cultural heart of Argentina. Known as the Paris of South America, the city boasts charming European-style architecture, historic cafes, grand theaters, and a nightlife that never sleeps. The San Telmo neighborhood, with its cobblestone streets and antique markets, is a perfect place to experience the spirit of the Porteños. Meanwhile, the iconic Caminito in La Boca captivates visitors with its colorful houses and outdoor tango performances. Speaking of tango, watching a show at Café de los Angelitos or the Teatro Colón is an unforgettable experience. But Argentina is not just about Buenos Aires. For nature lovers, Patagonia is one of the most stunning destinations on the planet. The Perito Moreno Glacier in the El Calafate region is a true natural wonder. With its towering blue ice walls that rise up to 70 meters, the spectacle of glaciers breaking off and crashing into the water leaves anyone speechless. If exploring mountains and crystal clear lakes is more your style, Bariloche is a must-visit destination. In the winter, the city transforms into one of South America's top spots for snow sports, while in the summer, its trails and landscapes are perfect for those seeking a deeper connection with nature. In the far north of the country, the Iguazu Falls, on the border with Brazil, are one of the 7 natural wonders of the world. The Devil's Throat, the largest and most impressive waterfall in the park, offers a unique experience, with the force of the water and the deafening roar creating a scene of pure grandeur. And of course, we can't forget about Mendoza, the land of wine. Located at the foot of the Andes Mountains, this region is famous for producing some of the world's best Malbecs. The vineyards offer amazing wine tastings and tours, with views of the vineyards and mountains that will make anyone fall in love. But despite all this beauty, traveling to Argentina requires some precautions. The economic crisis has a direct impact on tourism, and rampant inflation causes prices to fluctuate drastically from one day to the next. Additionally, it is essential to understand the famous parallel exchange rate, as exchanging money at official currency exchange offices may not be as advantageous as using the blue dollar, an unofficial exchange rate that is much more favorable. Argentina's economy is a true paradox. A country rich in natural resources with fertile lands, a strong industry, and a culture exported around the world, but one that seems trapped in an endless cycle of crises, inflation, and currency devaluation. How did one of the most prosperous countries of the 20th century end up with inflation surpassing 200% per year and a population that has to rely on the parallel market to preserve its purchasing power? The main villain in Argentina's economy has always been uncontrolled inflation. Each year, the Argentine peso loses value, and prices rise so quickly that the money you have today may be worth half of that in just a few months. To give you an idea, in 2023, Argentina's inflation was one of the highest in the world, surpassing even war-torn countries. This means that basic products like meat and milk can double in price from one month to the next, and salaries do not keep up with this escalation. The Argentine currency devalues so much that the population no longer trusts it. As a result, many Argentinians prefer to save their money in US dollars, which have become a kind of parallel currency in the country. But since the government restricts the official purchase of US dollars, the famous blue dollar exchange rate emerged, a non-official rate that is much higher than the official government rate. This creates a clandestine money market, where those who know the tricks can pay much less for imported products and international travel. The average salary in Argentina is around 300,000 Argentine pesos, which is approximately $350 at the official exchange rate, but much less at the blue dollar rate. On the other hand, the cost of living constantly changes due to inflation. Renting an apartment in Buenos Aires can cost between 200,000 to 500,000 pesos, around $250 to $600 at the parallel exchange rate. And a basic grocery bill for one person can run up to 100,000 pesos per month. This means that, for many families, surviving has become a game of strategy, where you need to exchange money at the right time, shop before prices rise, and adapt to an economy that never stabilizes. But how did Argentina reach this economic collapse? The problem stems from decades of misguided policies. The country has always had governments that spent more than they earned, creating massive deficits and printing money recklessly to cover these gaps. The result? A currency that constantly loses value and an ever-growing external debt. To make matters worse, Argentina has defaulted on its debt multiple times, pushing away investors and making it even harder to secure international credit. And let's not forget the major corruption scandals. From Carlos Menem to Cristina Kirchner, numerous Argentine governments have been marked by billion-dollar schemes of embezzlement, overpricing, and illicit enrichment of the political elite, while the people watch their economies sink. Now, the big question is there a solution for Argentina's economy? The current president, Javier Milei, has emerged as a promise of change, advocating for radical measures such as dollarizing the economy and abolishing the central bank. But will these ideas work, or will they be just another chapter in the country's long history of crises? Before analyzing what the future holds, we need to talk about the darker side of Argentina, the scandals, corruption, and political crises that have dragged the country into this hole. After all, behind every economic collapse, there is always a power game deciding who wins and who loses. If Argentina's economy is in collapse, its politics are not far behind. The country's recent history is marked by corruption scandals, populist governments, institutional crises, and a political division so intense that every election feels like a full-scale battle. But who is responsible for sinking the country? To understand Argentina's political chaos, we need to talk about Peronism, a movement that has dominated the country's politics since the 1940s. Created by Juan Domingo Perón, Peronism mixes nationalism, social policies, and a strong cult of personality. While it improved the lives of many workers in the past, it also brought a serious problem. Governments that spend more than they can afford, sustaining social programs with money that doesn't exist, which fuels the cycle of inflation and crisis. In recent years, Argentine politics has become a theater of scandals. Cristina Kirchner, who governed the country from 2007 to 2015 and later returned as vice president under Alberto Fernandez, became a symbol of corruption. Her government was marked by billion-dollar embezzlements, money laundering, and an overpricing scheme in public works. The most emblematic case was that of businessman Lázaro Báez, a close ally of Cristina, who moved over $60 million in bribes. In 2022, Cristina was convicted of corruption, but, thanks to her political influence, managed to avoid imprisonment. Another critical moment in Argentine politics was the mysterious death of prosecutor Alberto Nisman in 2015. He was investigating an alleged agreement between the Kirchner government and Iran to cover up the 1994 terrorist attack on the AMIA Jewish Center in Buenos Aires, which left 85 dead. Nisman was found dead in his apartment a day before presenting evidence against Cristina Kirchner. The government claimed it was a suicide, but most Argentinians believe he was murdered to silence his allegations. To this day, The case remains unsolved. But the problems didn't only come from Peronism. Before Cristina, former President Carlos Menem in the 1990s was involved in one of the country's largest scandals, smuggling weapons to Croatia and Ecuador, violating international treaties. Then came Mauricio Macri's government, 2015 to 2019, which tried to adopt liberal measures to recover the economy, but ended up increasing the external debt to alarming levels, contributing to the current crisis. Now, the country is in the hands of Javier Milei, a president who presents himself as a political outsider, promising to end the system that led Argentina to disaster. With radical ideas, such as dollarizing the economy, abolishing the central bank, and making deep cuts to public spending, Milei faces brutal resistance from Congress and the more traditional sectors of the country. His election represents a desperate attempt by Argentinians to find a way out of the chaos. But it is still too early to say whether he will be the country's savior or just another chapter in Argentina's long list of political disappointments. What is clear is that Argentina suffers not only from economic problems, but also from a corrupt political system where personal interests have always come before the well-being of the population. With each new crisis, history seems to repeat itself. But will this cycle ever be broken? Argentina is a country of extreme contrasts. On one side, a land rich in natural resources, with a vibrant culture and a passionate people who have already shown the world their talent in football, music, and cuisine. On the other side, a nation trapped in an endless cycle of crises, corruption, and political instability, where every solution seems to bring a new problem. But if there's one thing Argentina's history teaches us, it's that this country never gives up. Argentinians have faced hyperinflation, billion-dollar defaults, military coups, and even brutal dictatorships. But they always find a way to keep standing. The question remains, will the country finally manage to break this cycle and chart a path of stability and growth this time? With the rise of Javier Milei, Argentina is undergoing a new political and economic experiment. Many see him as a visionary, others as a dangerous madman. What no one can deny is that Argentina's fate is once again at stake. If his reforms succeed, the country might finally begin to rise again. If they fail, the crisis could deepen further, leading Argentina into an unprecedented collapse. In the end, Argentina's true strength lies not in its governments, but in its people. If any country has proven capable of reinventing itself, it's Argentina. The world is watching, and this South American giant's future might still surprise us all. And do you believe Argentina can turn things around, or do you think the country is doomed to repeat the same mistakes? Only time will tell.